Hey, this is Josh with Budget Mechanic. Changing the oil on our car is one of the most common things we can do for maintenance, but a lot of people are doing it wrong. You'd be surprised. Now I'm going to go over today the top 9 things that people get wrong when they change their oil and how you can avoid them. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that alert button so you don't miss on any upcoming content.
The first mistake that people make is they drain their old oil out when the car is cold. And the problem with this is that oil, when it's colder, is thicker and doesn't run out as easily. So the whole idea of changing your oil is to get that old oil because it has all the old particles and stuff that's really bad for your motor and you want to get it out. So when you do it with a cold motor, especially if you live in a cold environment, it's not going to get all the oil out and it's going to come out really slowly. So the most efficient and effective way to do it is to warm the engine up a little bit. You don't want it at operating temperature when you're trying to reach up in there and touch the filter and stuff, but you want it not cold. So get that temperature gauge off the cold mark and you're going to get a lot more oil out and it's going to come out faster.
The next mistake people make is they don't fill their new filter with oil before installing it. The reason you want to fill your new filter up with oil is because if you start your car after an oil change with an empty oil filter, there's several seconds where the oil pressure isn't enough in the engine to circulate your oil because it's all going into the new filter and filling it up. So that's a few seconds where your engine doesn't have sufficient oil pressure to properly lubricate it, which isn't good for it. Now with some cars it's harder because the oil filter is like mounted on the side of the engine, or they have a cartridge system that's mounted on the top maybe. But as much as you can, you want to get as much oil into your new filter as possible. The next mistake people make is not lubing the O-ring on the new filter before they install it. And there's a couple reasons that you want to do this. One, if you don't lubricate the rubber, sometimes it can catch on the metal surface of the engine and you don't get a good tight fit. So you want to lube it up so that it spins nice and freely and tightens up properly. The second reason you want to do it is because if it was totally dry and the engine surface was dry, there's a chance that when you go to take this filter off, not only is it going to make it hard to get the old filter off, but this O-ring seal actually pops out. And it could pop out and stick to the engine when you take the old one off, and it just can be annoying, and if you're not paying attention it would get in the way of the new filter going on. So the next one, and one I see a lot actually, is people over tightening their drain pan bolt. The drain pan bolt isn't holding anything onto your engine, it's just plugging a hole. So all it has to do is crush the washer that's on it, whether it's aluminum or copper, which you should probably replace when you do this. So it just has to be tight enough to crush that and create a seal, that's all. If you over tighten this bolt, you risk stripping out the threads on the oil pan itself, and over time doing that enough, you'll eventually strip them fully, and then when you're driving down the road, your bolt can come out, all the oil drains out, and you've ruined your motor. So when you're tightening your bolt, you want to turn it all the way till it stops, and then you want to take your wrench and push it a little bit further, just enough to crush whatever washer is in there to create that seal. The next mistake people make is over tightening the oil filter when they're putting it back in. So they make those cool oil filter wrenches for removing the filter, but you don't want to use them for putting the filter on, because you crank that thing on there, and then as the engine heats up and over time, the oil filter always gets tighter. So then when it comes time to take the old one off, it's really hard to get off, and that's why you need the wrench, and you're like sweating and struggling under there because someone over tightened the filter when they put it on. On my cars, when I'm doing oil changes, I don't have to use filter wrenches at all. If I properly oil the O-ring and I put it in nice and firm, hand tight, when it comes time to take it out and change my oil, I can do it by hand. It's really tight, but I can do it. And one thing that helps is they'll usually put some kind of texture at the top of the bottom of the filter, or some little finger grabbing points, and you should be able to do it by hand. So the next mistake is people overfilling their oil. No one intends to overfill their oil, but what happens is you go and refill and you put too much in. It's over the high mark on the dipstick. And instead of going down, unplugging the drain pan and taking some out, people are like, you know, a little oil, extra oil is probably fine, right? Not true. Putting too much oil in the system can create too much oil pressure, which would force oil past seals and O-rings, stuff like that, and you'll get oil leaks, which is bad. If you don't want to overshoot your full mark, check how much oil your car takes before you start pouring. The next oil change blunder is people don't check their oil to confirm that their oil level is correct on level ground. The reason this is a problem is, say this is your oil pan and you have a dipstick coming down from the top of the engine poking down into the oil that's sitting at the bottom of your oil pan. Well, if you park on a hill, all the oil runs to one side and it's going to read low. Or if you're tipped this way, it's going to read high. It's not going to be accurate. So the dipstick is only designed to work when the car is completely leveled forward and back and left and right. So if you were up on ramps or had jacked the car up to change the oil, you need to get off those ramps and off the jack to get an accurate measurement. Another mistake people make is at this point, they've refilled their oil, they close the hood and they walk away, oil change done. Problem with that is the new oil hasn't been cycled all the way through the engine, through the cracks and crannies and through the new filter. So it's going to give you an inaccurate reading. So what you want to do is run the car for like 10 seconds or more, let that oil fully circulate, shut the car off, give it a second to settle, and then check your oil, and that's going to give you your accurate reading. And at that point, you'll know if you need to add a little more oil or not. Just as a side note, if you were up on ramps and had to start the car to drive it down the ramps, that would probably take care of it. So the last one I want to mention is proper oil disposal. And we all know not to dump our oil down the storm drain, but a lot of people don't realize that there's a free and easy way to dispose of your old motor oil that's environmentally friendly. Pretty much every town in America has a program for recycling old oil. That may be a standalone recycling center, or it may be at a local auto parts store that offers the service. So take your motor oil there. Don't dump it in your vegetable garden. Well, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.